Our why for writing this book in some ways was extremely simple. We want to help many, many more people make a lot more progress than they are right now. And so from our perspective, we'd been building this process. Ethan, since at least 2009, had been doing some of this research. My personal mission statement certainly is help many, all individuals live lives of purpose and meaning and live up to their potential. And to help them do that, that starts with progress in your career and life.
I'm a professor of organizational behavior at the Harvard Business School. I have a tissue box in my office for a reason. And as we got to know more and more, we had more and more advice to offer. Those conversations with people who needed the advice got longer and longer. And as a result, the line of people who wanted to talk to us seemed to get longer and longer as well. And by giving these 9 activities, by providing the framework, by providing the rigorous research that informs the forces, the pushes and pulls, and the quests, our hope is that we're contributing to making a difference both for individuals and for the organizations that employ them.
We really wanted to write a book that didn't just help people transactionally get that next job or hack the job searching process, but really help people make progress in their lives so that they don't just find themselves, frankly, back to where they started for the same reasons that they quit their previous job.
And so after talking with thousands of job movers, they all talked about at least one thing in common, that those who had been successful had really thought about not just being hired by their next organization or job, but hiring their next job for progress they wanted to make in their career. We started by talking to a lot of people. I'm a researcher. I'm a qualitative researcher. I like hearing people's stories. And as people talked about their stories, they talked about the fact that part of the reason they'd moved, the motivation, was this idea that the organization they were working for had offered them progression. And they wanted to make progress. And the progress they wanted to make didn't match the progression they were being offered.
We took those stories. We actually started actively coaching many, many job seekers. We started with cohort-based approaches where we would try them out on a process based on what we had learned in the data. We saw what worked, what didn't work, for whom and why. We adjusted the process on a second go round. Then we tried to break the process, see how fast we could take them through it in the third round. And then by the end, that plus, frankly, years of Ethan's class, we had a pretty robust process that had worked for many, many people, was something that worked. The 9 steps that we recommend in the book, they work within someone's job searching process that they would do anyway.
It's a work smarter, not work harder kind of approach.
In the book, from the research we did, we understood that there were 4 broad quests that take all the pushes and pulls for why someone leaves a job and why someone goes to a certain opportunity to explain what's driving them. Some people jump into that really quickly. They just get it, right? Other people, had to stay on one particular step for a little bit longer, really understanding, for example, what really does drive me at work? What are the things that drive my energy? What drains my energy? And other people, they'd fly by that.
Part of the real variable here that we can't predict, we really deeply believe that this process is a social process. And so when you go out and talk to other people who are either close to you or perhaps far away from you, but know you well enough or understand the role you're looking for well enough that they can be useful, the process of finding those people, having those conversations, incorporating their feedback, that can take a very short amount of time or a longer amount of time, depending on the situation you're in.
I think a lot of people think that there is a perfect job. They think that there's going to be this imaginary thing that exists that's going to be great on, nirvana, right? It's going to be great on all dimensions. The reality is, for all of us, different jobs have great points in certain ways and parts that are not ideal or even are awful in certain dimensions. And so our argument is that if you understand what progress looks like to you, you truly understand your quest, you understand what drives your energy, you understand where you want to go in terms of your current capabilities and the capabilities you're seeking to develop, that if you can prioritize which of those are the most important, you can say, okay, I'm willing to trade off on, say, the bigger title or the more prestigious company because I get to do all these other things that are really important to me. And I would say our other argument to help people be satisfied in whatever they ultimately do is if you recognize the trade-offs you make up front in a very conscious way, you're a lot less likely to complain about them later.
Building on that, this is not a book about your dream job. This is a book about trade-offs. It's a book about making smart decisions about trade-offs and recognizing, by the way, that just because you're on one quest today doesn't mean you won't be on a different quest in 5 years' time. And so the set of trade-offs may be very different. Any book about careers that's worth its weight in gold should be about trade-offs, not about dream jobs.
One of the biggest ones, I think, is you don't understand what progress looks like to you. And so you take a job, it sounds great, it's away from what you're doing, whatever that change is. But because you didn't understand the things you were running away from, the things you were pulling toward, you end up right back where you started.
I have my own pet peeve on this, which is we so often talk about, when we're trying to give advice, strengths and weaknesses. The problem with both of those words, strengths and weaknesses, is every time I hear them, I think about myself, to some extent, I was born with those strengths and weaknesses. But we much prefer thinking of it as an asset because assets, after all, get built by you at a measurable cost. They depreciate over time. It's all about maintaining those assets, that pool of assets that's relevant to what you want to do.
A big thing that we recommend in the book is to keep doing these informational interviews, keep networking with people. In our view, job seeking, job searching, learning about jobs is fundamentally a social process. And so in the book, we have an approach that is different from your normal informational interview. What we want you to learn in these informational interviews is like, what's your actual day-to-day and week-to-week like? And how does it line up with the things that I'm seeking in my career in terms of those capabilities I have and want to build and want to lean into, in terms of the things that drive my energy and in terms of avoiding those things that drain my energy.
We make progress by moving. So that's part of the reason why we want people to be better at it, because they'll make more progress. There should be a conversation that could be had about that at any point in time. And yet we find people talk about it very rarely. Some of that is shyness. Some of that is concern about how people will respond at work or at home to the discussion. The more social we can make this process, the better. We encourage, whether they're informational interviews or just conversations with the manager or with HR, both directions should be asking always, what quest are you on? What are the forces at work? How can we manage that within this role? And if we can't, how do we think about the next one?
And I'll say quickly that when you do those things, that's staying relevant because you're clear on what the marketplace is asking for, what are in-demand roles, how are they changing from maybe a year, 2 years ago. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see is when they just start firing off job applications into the ether because they see something and they're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And I'm always like, make a relationship first, have a conversation that's not transactional, get to know what they're really looking for and how it does or doesn't fit with what you're really looking for.
It's now been 26-ish years since McKinsey published their War for Talent. It was not the first time that phrase had been used, as far as I know, but it was the first time it really captured executives' attention, the world's attention. And yet, those prescriptions from that article, they still work. Organizations are still implementing them. Changed quite a bit as well, or got modified, somewhat written in addition to what was there by the pandemic. We had shifting preferences in the workplace. We had shifting definitions of what productivity means, shifting definitions of what work-life means, shifting definitions of what work environments are. All these shifting definitions and the preferences that were attached to them that people were managing themselves on a daily basis suddenly became organizations' challenge, organizations' responsibilities. When the pandemic ended, it was that desire for those preferences layered on top of the fact that the world has been changing faster and faster in terms of what remains relevant and what doesn't has led to a level of impatience that continues to accelerate that trend towards more and more moves, shorter and shorter tenures within role.
We have this stereotype, right, of the upcoming Gen Z where we say, oh, they're so impatient. They want leadership yesterday and more and more. Of course they do, because we're telling them accurately that the half-life of skills is shrinking faster than it ever has before. AI is blowing up whole functions of roles. We don't know how it's reinventing work. We have really important studies from McKinsey, right, showing how many millions of jobs are going to be impacted from all these moves to AI, automation, and on through 2030. Well, of course they're impatient because they're scared. The level of anxiety is high. How's this going to affect me? I want to use the capabilities I have to, the best effect right now. We've seen in many ways just an acceleration of that anxiety and sort of flurry, if you will, or churn in the market. And they're making demands, right? I think it's really hard on entry-level workers who are coming into the workplace and not able to build relationships, get to know people that, they want to be in the office place, or they want to at least have connection at certain times, or sometimes they don't know it, but it would help them in their careers to connect. And the flip is also true, right? Certain individuals, maybe middle of their careers, I think more than the senior managers, are often sort of, I want to be at home. I want to be with family. I have different priorities. I want to regain control, right, of certain things. We have to build the muscle within organizations that maybe the behavior is not necessarily you're all in the office 9 to 5, 3 days a week, and it's these days and command and control, but instead that managers are super intentional, mentors are super intentional about making sure you are building that reservoir of social capital across the firm, across the industry, outside of the industry, so you can get access to opportunities and information that guide your decision-making in the future.
And what I hope we've done just a little bit of, just chipped away a little at the problem with this book with doing, is providing activities for that, so that people can actually articulate the energy drivers and drains for them, the capabilities they're seeking to build. Managers can talk more about what it is that they do and how that relates to various prototypes someone might have for their next role as they think about it. The same way that new product development gets done. People can show up and offer a story, a career story that's compelling because it's built not just on being told, have an elevator pitch, but actually using Pixar's approach to storytelling, so they have a story spine that captures what they've learned about themselves through the process we take them through and can communicate it easily.
It's a huge challenge. And I think one of the first things we do in the book is try to say, it's not just about having the mentor. You can have almost a board of directors, a few mentors, because how could you find that single magical person who's going to have all of the answers to your questions in just one single person? It's not possible. And so part of this, I think, is taking down the temperature and sort of lowering the anxiety to finding your mentor. I think the second thing that comes out of this is if you really do the work with people who initially just care about you, loving people in your life, your manager, folks like that, you're going to start to develop a keener sense of what drives you at work. What are those energy drivers? What are those capabilities that really light you on fire, you want to do more of? We're trying to say, no, this is an organic opportunity to connect. And if you have something to give them to really show that you've put in thought, they'll have something to give you as well.
We're also just as instructional for mentors as we are for everyone else. We have a chapter written for mentors. The book is designed so that a person can take the chapter to a mentor, a potential mentor, maybe somebody who's never mentored before, and say, here's what it means to be my mentor in this process. All you need to do is follow these instructions. I'll follow my instructions, and we'll make progress together. And so it lowers the bar for both the search for the perfect mentor, because you're just looking for somebody who knows you, knows the context, is smart enough to have that conversation. It turns out that if you publish a book based on research where you understand all the pushes and pulls that cause people to move from one job to the next, When you show it to managers and organizations who aren't thinking of moving jobs, you know what they see? They see a list of why people quit. And they see a list of all of the ways that they can try to keep people from quitting if they were only to understand which forces were at work in a particular moment in time. And therefore, they see a list that they can take around and ask somebody, so which of these pushes and pulls are functioning for you right now? Understand maybe from that your quest, and have a conversation about how to retain you that doesn't involve things that really don't work particularly well, like money or other kinds of perks that might keep you for 2 months, but they're not going to keep you for 10. What's going to keep you for 10 is knowing that you're going to make the progress you want to make within this role and that you have a manager who cares about helping you do so. That's what people management can be. And that's, I think, the basic umbrella for what we can offer to organizations. But it goes much deeper than that.
Once you understand these pushes and pulls, we recommend that this becomes part of the performance management system for companies. And then the third thing I would just say, how many of you are doing the role that you were hired for based on what the job description said? Almost no one's hand goes up. None of us are actually doing what the job descriptions say. And so we ask ourselves over and over again, well, why do we keep writing job descriptions with long laundry lists of skills that may or may not have anything to do with what you're actually going to do in the role? And ultimately, our conclusion is they're really legal documents at the end of the day. They're ways to hire and fire and protect the employer. They're not really descriptive of what someone is actually going to do, the experiences in that job. And so one of the big things that we recommend is, okay, if you have to have the job description the way you do, that's a question. But if you have to, let's at least develop a shadow job description that describes what's the day-to-day and week-to-week actually like here, so that people who understand this is what I like doing, these are the things that really light me on fire, can actually recognize fit much better, as opposed to say, oh, they're looking for unicorns, I have to puff up my chest and look like a superhero to get them to hire me.
Once you know what you want to do as opposed to what you want to be, then to some extent you're a consumer. And we know today one of the big shifts in consumer behavior, we all expect the app to customize to us. We expect a customized user experience as a customer. Well, newsflash, if people grow up that way, they start to expect customized experiences as an employee as well. And now you're actually capable of having a conversation for how to provide that. Now you can meet potentially some of those shifting preferences and shifting definitions that we saw during the pandemic.
I'll say one thing that always surprises me, which is when you're sitting in your office imagining why people do anything in the world, you can come up with all sorts of reasons. And you come up with all sorts of jobs to be done that they have in their lives. And I found consistently over and over again to have the humility that I'm not smart enough to know what those are until we actually get on the ground and watch people's stories as they have, in fact, have switched jobs and understand what the quests are. And I would not have imagined the quests that we came up with. Even more so, I would not have imagined the forces that we came up with. What came out of it, frankly, it was all a surprise. It was all revelatory. I would say, secondly, when it started helping me in my own career and my own decisions, that was certainly a surprise as well. That wasn't one of the reasons we wrote the book, but wow, it's powerful when you avoid some potential mistakes because you used your own research to help guide you and do better.
When you are a researcher, especially a qualitative researcher, there are two things you fear. I won't be able to collect enough data, and it won't end up telling me anything after I've collected all of it. Admittedly, we picked a topic where collecting data only got easier. The Great Resignation in particular made it very easy for us to hear a lot of stories, a lot of painful stories, but also stories of progress. The second one was the one that surprised me more, though. We reached a point at which we coalesced on these pushes and pulls faster than I would have imagined. There was far more agreement across data points, even a lot of different data points. And we tried to be diverse in this book, very diverse, in who we talked to and where they were in their careers and where they were in the world and where their backgrounds were and all these things. Across tremendous diversity, there was extraordinary commonality. Not commonality such that there was only one quest, but enough commonality that there weren't 20. Enough commonality that weren't 100 pushes and pulls. It really very easily clustered down to 30. And that was surprising to me. I expected there to be much more variation out there than there actually was.